to the Breakfast Leadership Show, where we interview global thought leaders on business, leadership, and life. Here's your host, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and chief burnout officer of the Breakfast Leadership Network, Michael Levitt.
Welcome back. I've got Kenny Lange online. Kenny, how are you?
I'm doing well, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Really looking forward to this conversation. Love talking with people that are in the leadership space. We're all leaders, by the way. So even if you don't have a title of leader, you are a leader of your life and your family, your community, and all that. But Kenny definitely is, a leader. So I'll share a little bit about yourself, and then we'll jump into the conversation.
Yeah. So I am now a two-time founder because I didn't learn my lesson the first time. And husband, father, I'm a foster parent, also adoptive father. So we have 3 bio kids and 2 adopted ones. And it's a big reason behind the coaching practice is really building a platform that would allow us to positively impact 10,000 kids by 2033. So we don't want to adopt 10,000 kids. I don't think I could take it, but if we can make a difference by taking my skills and abilities and scaling organizations, then we'll take that path there.
It's important work that you're doing, and obviously your own biological ones, and children are children. And I think back to what Maury Povich used to say on his show all the time. I'm not going to get into the reasons why I watched that. It's a lot of it was brain numbing material, but one of the things that he did, and I always appreciated that. He would tell somebody that had a DNA test and discovered that they weren't the biological parent. He would tell them, especially if they wanted to stay in the relationship, which was good. It's like, look, I have children of my own that aren't biologically mine, but they are my children. And
Absolutely.
It means all the difference in the world. And I remember, I had some neighbors that I knew and lived across the street from several, almost 15 years ago now. Time flies. But they had 2 biological children, and then they were foster parents, and they did that for. I'm guessing they're still probably doing it. I've lost touch with them, but at that point they'd been doing it for almost 20 years, and
Wow.
there were. Yeah. And, there was one daughter that they had, that, had some challenges growing up before and even, when I first, got in, but then, she's an adult now, she's crushing it, because they created an environment for her to do it. And I see that. And I'm like, it's all about just, giving them an opportunity and creating an environment for them to thrive. And ultimately, it's their choice and their path that they do. But when you can create a loving, caring environment for them to kind of discover their way, it means all the difference in the world. So I celebrate all parents, but ones that, that go the extra mile and say, we're going to foster some children here. That is a superpower. And I commend people that do it, because the world becomes better because of that, and giving those kids an opportunity. So, what drove you to first, venture into that world of being foster parents?
Well, we actually didn't think we were going to be foster parents, but we did know we were going to adopt. My dad adopted me, so that's been a part of my story. I knew wanted it to be a part of my parenting story. And my now wife, when we were dating, I mentioned that, and I said, that's kind of a make or break. Fast forward, we have, 3 biological kids. They're all in elementary school. The oldest is 7. I guess the next would be 6, and then a 4-year-old. And my wife was bringing them home from elementary school and doing the normal parent, like, well, what'd you do that was fun today? And how was it? Anything cool in PE? And out of nowhere, our oldest son, Isaac, said, Mom, could we foster or adopt a kid? Weird thing for a 7-year-old to say. I mean, he's a weird kid, but I don't know where he gets it from. And my wife, who is just brilliant with children, instead of just like, oh, it's a silly thing, maybe you watched a movie or a TV show, there was a lesson, and she didn't dismiss it. She goes, maybe, but why do you ask? And he said, well, there's a lot of kids who don't have a good home. And maybe if they live with us, they will understand that they can make bad choices and still be loved. And when she told me that, I was like, all right, well, I mean, if he gets the unconditional love of God, maybe so should we. And it was soon after that, it's like, we've always talked about adopting, but we've never really done anything. And maybe we could look into this foster thing. And that just started our journey. And I want to say 8 to 9 months later, we were licensed foster parents. And since then we fostered 18. And out of those 18 is where the 2 adopted sons have come from. So, we'll continue to do that. We've taken a pause. My wife had some health issues, but she's doing much better now. Thank the Lord. But it's still something that's big on our heart, and we try to step in wherever we can. So that's what got us going. And I'll be honest, there's a lot of things in my work now as a leadership and scaling coach that is informed by those experiences. Because a lot of what you described of, we created the right environment and helped, your neighbor's, daughter, like, have choices and, give them ownership of that, but create the right environment. I think that's a lot of what leadership is. Because in my opinion, good parenting is good leadership, and good leadership is good parenting. I know some people would try to separate those. I've not seen that be as effective as learning from each other and taking that back and forth between work and home.
Yeah, people try to silo work and home life, and I tell them, please don't. As it's who you are as an individual, is your holistic self. It's all of you. I mean, okay, yeah, don't maybe attempt to change the diaper of a coworker kind of thing. I'm saying that's silly, but there's certain things you do at home and certain things you don't, and I get that. But the lessons and even your 7-year-old coming up with that, it's a great leadership. I mean, obviously, it's a great character reminder of the gift that young man is. And it's a good reminder, though, that those ideas and concepts and things that can make your business grow can come from the people that are working for you and with you. A lot of times we look at the C-suite, we all bounce ideas around each other and all that. It's like, hey, if we ask the team about this, are we just going to spring it on them, or maybe can we do a trial run? And say, okay, what does this sound like? And,
Right.
And that's where you have, a lot of times they'll say, well, we have our key employees that, provide us a sounding board. And I said, well, I'm glad you have that, but open that up to everyone. Because there are some ideas that could be game changing for your company, but if you don't ask them, they may not feel comfortable sharing it. Or, if they have the entrepreneurial spirit, they may, I'm not going to share this. I'm going to save this in my back pocket, and I'm going to launch a business. And guess what? You have a former employee that is taking all your lunch money now, because you didn't create the environment for them to share that. And
Right.
they may have wanted to. They may have said, I'd rather not do trade the 9 to 5 for the 6 a.m. to midnight job. As entrepreneurs, we all know that sometimes can be the case. Don't make it the norm, but it can be the case from time to time. But ultimately, it boils down to parenting and leadership are two sides of the same coin, basically. And the lessons I learned from raising kids, and again, I don't think about it. It's just, okay, how do you treat people? How do you look for opportunities to make things better for your environment, whether it's in your bungalow or if it's in your office, or anywhere in between?
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, we're all just trying to bring out the best in the people that I think we're privileged to lead. And I do firmly believe that leadership is a privilege. It's not a right. But I love what you said about, let's invite more people into it. I think the people closest to the work are the ones who should be weighing in on the work that needs to be done. Doesn't mean that they, have the biggest context and perspective on everything. But to invite them in is a great way to find those nuggets of inspiration and also just a great way to institutionalize innovation, which is part of the spark you got to maintain so that as you grow and you scale, you don't become an overly processed bureaucratic nightmare that might end up spawning several people to go out on their own because they're so tired of the red tape and not having a say. So yeah, it's a great way. It's a great retention strategy too, because good Lord, that's expensive to keep hiring and losing people.
Yeah, it's very expensive, and a lot of times people don't really pay much attention to it because it doesn't jump out per se in the financial statements, but we're starting to see that now a little bit. That's why you're seeing companies, well, they may not be doing the best job on that, but that's why bringing in people like you helps because it's starting to impact on the insurance claims. We know that the mental health claims have skyrocketed over the last few years, just because life can cause you to have some mental health challenges, just on a good day. But and we're seeing that. So what's happening is it's starting to register a little bit. From the financial side of things, like, why did our insurance go up? Well, if they say, well, our claims went up 72% over the last 2 years. What kind of claims? Orthotics, is it dental? What's going on? No, it's mental. They don't tell you who, what, but they'll say, yeah, no, the mental health claims have gone up. What? And then they're trying to figure out, okay, why is that going on? Well, because your managers that haven't been properly trained on how to manage people are crushing their people, and they're either leaving or they're going out on medical leave, or seeking mental health, which I highly implore people to do if they need it. But it's finally hitting the bottom line, basically, and it's causing some organizations to finally do something about it, or attempt to anyway. And some are doing well with it, a lot are not. But I think that's where it's so critically important to have people in the world like you that are going into organizations like, okay, let's approach this maybe a little bit differently. And I know we talked about this a little bit in the pre-show, where you've been at this for quite some time, but you've kind of taken stock, I guess, and you're looking at some potential new approaches on how you work with companies and help people, which is, again, it speaks volumes to your character, but also it's similar to what you just said, where you're like, okay, you want to scale, you want to grow business, you want to do some things. So even in your own business, you look and go, okay, what can I do differently here? And that's amazing for, leadership, coaches and advisors to have that conversation with themselves and their team, because too often it's like, well, I use the cookie cutter approach. Or you go into an organization, you use the same boilerplate SOP, you do all those things, and there's nothing wrong with those. I'm a big fan of checklist, but you also have to kind of read the room and take the temperature and go, okay, what are the ingredients I have here? What kind of dish can I make with what I have so it doesn't require me to go to the store to pick something else up? I'd love to hear, your thoughts on, that process of you saying, I want to approach something a little bit different. So I'd go ahead and dive into that.
Yeah. I going back to what you were saying about just coming in with a playbook or process or something and trying to, say, no matter what's here, I'm going to do this. It is, it's a little tone deaf, but it's sort of the cliched, when you're a hammer, you think everything's a nail. And while I think you could hammer a screw, you might get it in a little bit, but it's not going to do what it was intended to do. And so, I do try to eat my own dog food, as they say. And I'm a huge fan of advocating for, pay attention to what you're paying attention to. And I think so many of us are on autopilot, myself included, from time to time. And it's like, okay, well, I noticed that my clients are getting results. That's great. Yay. Why? I have tools. I'm certified. I'm a framework nerd to the 10th degree. Like that's just, and it's one of the reasons why I love being in this business is because I've just always paid attention to, oh, well, that's a cool approach and that's a neat tool. And this is a cool set of, like questions or frameworks or mental modes. But I started wondering, well, how am I selecting these when I'm coming in contact with whatever the problems are? Now, it's age old wisdom to say, you fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And, you want to be solving roughly the same problem over and over again. And I think in some ways I do, but, if we're talking about ingredients, which it's funny, I just published a blog post about how framework addiction is killing your company, about like trying to make 6 different cakes when you only have ingredients for one. And I think you may end up with the same cake, but you may be starting with a different set of ingredients. And so with the what I've documented, I'm calling the lead to scale approach. And it really is it's a whole leader, whole organization transformation from the inside out. And I think there are so many programs and platforms and tools that just try to start like, okay, well, let's get the senior leadership team or the executive team in here and let's run through some team health stuff. And we're going to do strategic planning and create a binder that's 70 pages. No one's going to read in 2 days. Maybe it'll prop a door open and be useful. But I got tired of those sort of things. And also, going back to what you were saying about management, reading some statistics that the first time people are given management responsibilities is in their early 30s, and the first time they're trained to be a manager is in their early 40s. There's a 10-year gap there. Like, no wonder. So are we willing to let people flounder and suck at their jobs and also negatively impact a whole bunch of other people we gave them influence and authority over for a decade before we figured this out? I just, I don't think anybody means to do that. But we can't ignore the reality. So I put everything in 3 buckets. Like, you've got to lead. 1, start with yourself. I start with the leader. So most of my engagements now will start with whoever the most senior executive is. And it may be the founder, CEO, executive director, whatever their title may be. And for 3 to 6 months, we're just working together to detangle their thoughts. Let's get a handle on their on their leadership. And then we can move to the team. And that's where the grow part comes in, is we've got to grow the performance, grow the health, the impact, the influence of a team. And that may be the senior leadership team, and maybe the next level, the management team, or maybe those frontline, those sort of like team leader, team captain peoples that you would have. And then we have to scale the organization if you want to. Scaling's an option, and it's very different from growth. You have to implement wildly different strategies when you decide to scale than if you just want to grow. And both are good. You just have to make peace with the trade-offs that come with either within each of those. And so I have like a dual flywheel graphic that goes with this. And that's, lead, growth, scales on the outside. The inside, the engine of it is that we repeat over and over is aware, align, accountable, aware, align, accountable. Just like you were talking about, you got to start from this taking stock, this place of awareness. How am I leading? How is this team functioning? Because otherwise, whatever you build on top of that, you're building on top of quicksand. If you don't start from how are things actually going, even if they're terrible, say so. Like, you know what? I suck at this part of being a leader. Okay, cool. Well, now we can do something about it, right? And we can implement the right strategies, the right ingredients, and then, develop, implement systems tailored to that person or that team or that whole organization that allow it to make good on its intentions. And then that just repeats over and over. And the more I thought about it and the more I looked at my own history as an entrepreneur, my first company was acquired after 5 years, and I helped that company scale and nearly double revenue in 2 years and go from a single state to 6 states and 4 countries. And I just kept looking back, and it's like, aware, align, accountable. And then we impact individuals, and then we went to the team, and then we went to the whole organization. I just keep seeing that pattern repeated.
I love the AAA, but then you can't use that one because there's an automotive company that has that logo. So, but it's so important, it's
Yeah.
the awareness, of course, and sometimes we're on autopilot, like you said before, and we're not aware. Accountability. I thrive on that, and I'm thankful that my wife holds me accountable on pretty much everything and things that I'd much rather not be held accountable on. But it's good for me. It's good for me. I know that. And I say that
Yeah.
truthfully. I would, you know, hand on Bible in court say, yes, it's good for me. Um,
Yeah.
but it's one of those things for leaders, and especially, in when you're working with someone and going into a deep dive, over several months, a lot of times they look at it and they go, months, like we're going to be peeling back a lot of layers here. Hopefully it's not an onion, but we'll figure that out as soon as we start peeling back some things, and you can kind of carve out some of those things, and it's good for growth. And uh, we see this all the time. Organizations, they grow and then they get stagnant and they think, well, we're okay, we're going to be fine. But a stat that I share on the show all the time, a couple of them, and ironically, both of them are 52%, which I'm curious about that percentage. But 52% of the Fortune 500 companies from the year 2000 no longer exist. And for us, the year 2000 does not seem that long ago, but it's like when over half of Fortune 500, these are the top companies on the planet, gone. And then we saw, the companies that were launched during the pandemic. So 52% of the online businesses that launched in 2020 are also gone in 5 years. And why? I mean, there's a lot of common denominators in there. Some of it was they had rapid growth. Some of them, maybe didn't. And there's I spent time in San Diego. There's a biopharmaceutical company was worth $6 billion with a B dollars. I know I should probably do the 6 billion with the pinky because I got the hairstyle of Dr. Evil. But I should do that more. But that's probably trademarked, so I won't. But here's a company, $6 billion. They're out of business. They're gone. And like, how do you go? Could you save a little bit for something? But what happened is they took off like a rocket, and unfortunately, they didn't have plans on, well, how do we land this, or where's this rocket going, kind of thing.
Right.
And there's countless stories of that, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big infrastructure guy. I love infrastructure.
Same.
Like the analogy of, okay, you have an hour or 2 hours to chop down a tree. What would you do? Well, hour and a half or an hour and 45 minutes sharpening the saw. It's important. It makes sure you have a good, solid foundation of how you run your business, understanding all the nuances of it. It makes you more agile instead of, I just like running with the wind. And, there are people that, somehow, by the grace of God, can navigate and continue to be successful, but you ask them, where's your operating procedures manual, manual, and they look at you like, manual? I don't have a manual. And
We don't have time for that.
no, nobody got time for that. And you go, how in the world is this still going and thriving? It is. So, those are always those studies where you go, is there something here that I could learn from that could be applied? And of course there is. There's always opportunities on that. But I think ultimately it boils down to, with the more things change, the more they stay the same. However, the way that work is working is changing and has changed. And we've got multiple generations in the workforce, and their viewpoints and what work should look like can be dramatically different. And not just a pigeonhole a generation, because I know baby boomers that are not what you would describe as baby boomers when it comes to their approach to work. And then there are people that are younger that you would think, okay, they're a little bit more freelance in this, and they're like, no, I want this to be a perfect 90-degree angle, and it has to be this, and we take our breaks at 11:42 a.m. and 2:16 p.m. Every day period.
Years.
Yeah, it's like, Yeah, I'm an accountant. I want things to be accurate, but it's like, okay, it's not going to break my heart if I use this computer instead of that one. Okay,
Right.
but I know some people are like, yeah,
Yep.
we'll use the word particular. That's a little bit nicer
I
word.
like it.
Yeah, particular and what they do, and that's fine. It works for them.
Nice.
It's their system. Okay, I'm not going to mock their system. It may not work for me, but
Yeah.
if they're getting done and they're successful and they're contributing and making it, it's like, okay, give them the leeway. So,
Yeah.
in closing, what are some closing thoughts you want to leave with the audience?
I think I would leave them with this, is that is going back to that awareness piece of just thinking about what you think about. Well, what are you good at? What do you suck at? And if you want to grow, then you're going to have to get, as a former mentor of mine, challenged me. He goes, are you willing to ruthlessly interrogate the reality of your life? And I was like, I think so, but that sounds scary. And if you're willing to do that, then I think you will start to grow, because your department, your company, your idea, whatever, it can't grow more than you're willing to. And I share this a lot in hiring, but I think it could be really good for yourself as a challenge is, I've seen a ton of resumes. I've probably interviewed, several, well over 300 people at this point, and at different points in my career. And there's a difference between having 10 years of experience and 1 year of experience 10 times. So, what are you going to do so that the next 12 months isn't the same as the previous 12 months and you grow? Because that could be the secret to unlocking everything you want.
Yep, and that's important. Never stop growing, never stop learning. So, love this conversation. Where can people find out more about you and this amazing work you're doing?
So, easiest way is kennylange.com, Lange. And then How Leaders Think is my podcast. So publish every Wednesday. Coming up on 100 episodes. I'm really excited about that. So I've survived. I know I'm playing catch up to a lot of you veterans in the podcast space. But so that, and then I'm on all the socials. You can usually just plug in my name. But LinkedIn is probably the best place to connect with me. So website, LinkedIn, and then the podcast, which is also on YouTube if you prefer to look at my face.
There you go. Awesome. I'll have that on the show notes, and congratulations on breaking through. Most podcasts don't make it to 50. So approaching 100, congratulations. You earned the badge of longevity for sure. So thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it and love the conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Breakfast Leadership Show, part of the Breakfast Leadership Network. Visit breakfastleadership.com for tips on empowering your business and your life.